Hello and welcome to Unit 2 of MBA 6103, Managing Innovation. This week we are going to discuss innovation as a core business process. And part of that discussion will focus on how we can build innovation into an organization in a way that helps innovation occur on purpose. We often think of innovation within an organization as something that is accidental or occurs kind of naturally, kind of an emergent design perspective with regard to innovation, something that just is very haphazard or is accidental. And we want to be able to focus on innovation in a way that allows innovation to be very purposeful, something that we encourage, something that we can kind of foster and create, and allow our organization to be more effective and come up with new concepts, new ideas, and new processes that allow us to be competitive. Because if we simply sit back and hope for the best and hope that innovation occurs on accident, then we'll find that we're very quickly left behind out there in the market, because many of our competitors devote R&D dollars and other resources to simply focusing on new technologies, new processes, new services. So we're going to focus this week on how can we create an environment and a strategy internal to the organization that allows innovation to be purposeful, and it's something that we craft and mold and create in a way that we're not simply relying on it to occur on accident. So along the lines of focusing on innovation as a process that is internal to the organization, something that we create, something that we focus on with a purpose, something that is intentional, something that is not accidental, we have to start with some resemblance of an innovation model, something that looks like an intentional model that has a purpose for creating innovation within the organization. Now, and part of the reason we focus on this material this week is because if you think about the operation of an organization, we often become comfortable, and an organization that is competitive or has been successful at either launching a new product or offering a new service that has kind of gained traction in the marketplace, something that is successful for our organization, might become a cash cow, might be something that the organization relies on for a constant revenue stream. If that takes place, we might be competitive for a little while. We might be kind of the leaders in the marketplace, but it's simply a matter of time. It doesn't take very long before we become complacent and we get comfortable kind of being the market leader, or comfortable being successful at offering that product or service. And when we become comfortable, that kind of leads to a stagnation of innovation. We don't focus on, well, let's go out and reinvent ourselves again and again and again, because we're successful now. So why would we want to focus on something new? Let's just kind of sit back and kind of ride this train for a little while and enjoy the good life, because we've got a good thing going. So we're not focused on the future. We're not looking at, okay, what's the next big thing 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road. Instead, we're just comfortable with what we're doing. And that's the mentality that we want to stay away from. We want to be focusing on continuous improvement, new technologies, new products, new services, in order to continue to maintain that competitive advantage. So having some type of innovation model, having some type of innovation process within our organization so that we're constantly encouraging, fostering, kind of fueling that innovative process. We're encouraging either a group or groups within our organization to constantly be evolving, offering new products, new services, and creating new products and services, trying to figure out ways to do things cheaper, better, faster, smarter. And that requires that we are constantly focusing on what's taking place in our industry. So at this point in your MBA program or in your academic or professional career, you've probably become very familiar with the SWOT analysis. And we're not going to focus obviously on SWOT analysis. Again, you've probably conducted so many SWOT analyses that you're tired of doing them by now. But SWOT analysis, the reason we do SWOT analysis over and over again is because it's a tool that simply helps us focus on understanding both the internal and external environment. So if we think about the SWOT analysis, you know that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you draw your little grid, your 4-box grid, one for strengths, one for weaknesses, one for opportunities, one for threats. But if you think about what the SWOT analysis is and what it's kind of comprised of, the strengths and weaknesses refer to the internal environment of our organization. So when we conduct a SWOT analysis, we're simply scanning our internal environment. We're looking at our organization internally and thinking, okay, what are our strengths as an organization? What are the things that we do very well? And what are the weaknesses as an organization? What are the things that we don't do well? What are the things that we need to improve or could do better? That type of thing. So that's a kind of an internal scan of our organization. And that's kind of the power of the SWOT analysis, is that it serves as a tool for us to focus on our organization internally, what we're good at, what we're not so good at. And then also in the other two grids of the SWOT analysis are the opportunities and the threats. And the opportunities and threats are the external environment. What are the opportunities out there in the marketplace, in our industry? What are kind of the new and emerging things that are taking place in our strategic landscape that we can capitalize on, opportunities that we can invest in, that we can take advantage of, that we can kind of create new market space? What are those opportunities that are out there? And the same is true of threats. What are the threats that are on the horizon for our organization? And so the SWOT analysis, it is actually kind of a foundation. It gives us a foundation for an innovation model within our organization. Now, we often just conduct SWOT analysis when we're trying to do some strategic planning or put together an executive level strategy for the next year, 2 years. But instead, what we should really focus on with the SWOT analysis is having that solid internal scan and external scan so that we're intimately familiar with what's taking place out there in the market and what's taking place internal to our organization. And we put those two things together and we can put together some strategies for addressing those. So we start there. We start with searching. And in the book this week, we have some really good visuals, and I've brought those here into the PowerPoint as well. So we've got some great visuals this week that really kind of put into table form or visual format some of these ideas for building an innovation model. So we start with searching, and you'll see in the visual coming up on the next slide, that's where we begin. We have to go out and search for what's taking place out there in the external environment as well as what's taking place internally. And once we know that, once we've kind of scanned the environment internally and scanned the environment externally, we can start to compress those ideas or issues that are taking place, kind of compress those into the next step of a simplistic innovation model, which is to then select what factors we need to address strategically. Now, if we've gone out there and we've scanned the external environment and we know that our industry is changing, we've scanned the internal environment and we know that perhaps we're not prepared to handle that particular type of change, we've figured out what are our strengths and our weaknesses, opportunities, threats, all those things that are taking place out there in the industry as well as what's taking place internally in our organization. Now we have to select which factors we want to address, because if we appropriately scanned the environment both internally and externally, we know that we are going to figure out and come up with all kinds of issues, all kinds of things that are changing in the market, or all kinds of issues that we have internally to our organization, and we know that we can't address all of them. We would love to. We would like to fix everything, and we'd like to seize every opportunity to take advantage of every potential opportunity out there in the market, minimize every threat in the market, but we cannot do that. We don't have the resources to address everything we should be identifying in a internal and external scan. So instead, we select which factors are most appropriate for us to address strategically. An example of the publishing business, book publishing business. If we were a publishing house, and we know that print media is dying, if not already dead. Print media is obviously having its own challenges and issues, and we're not, as a publishing house, or maybe a newspaper or something like that, we're not equipped to address some of the issues that we're facing. We're not equipped to take our print media to the digital realm, and publish it online, and allow people to read our media on digital devices like tablets and phones and that kind of thing. Then we know there are some factors that we have to address from a strategic perspective. So we've selected those factors. Then we have to move to the next phase of this kind of oversimplified innovation model, which is to convert that idea. We select the factor to address, and that becomes an idea. Okay, the idea is we need to move into digital space with our newspaper, because otherwise our business model is dead and dying. So we have an idea. We have to now convert that idea into action, and that's often easier said than done. Perhaps we don't have the resources. We don't have the technical capability. We might not have the people, the staff, the location, whatever it is, to convert that idea into action. Yet we have to figure out a strategy to do that. Once we've converted that idea into action, then we got to figure out, how do we capture value from it? And again, this is a challenge, because capturing value doesn't simply mean, okay, we're finished, we accomplished that, we're done. We need to figure out a way not only to execute, but how do we sustain the adoption of that product or service among consumers. We don't want just a handful of people to adopt that technology or that product or service and then it be over, kind of a flash in the pan. If we think back to the project life cycle that we've already taken a look at, we don't want that, product life cycle. If we think back to the product life cycle that we've already visited, think back to that. We don't want that product life cycle to be so compressed that this new idea that we just came out with and we rolled it out, and we don't want it to be adopted and over in 6 months. We want it to last. We want it to sustain. We want to try to extend that product life cycle as long as possible. we also want to use to capture value from this new idea, this new product or service. We also want to capture value by expanding our own knowledge base, so that if we have to do something similar, roll out a new product or service that is very similar to this, or an update or a type of sustaining innovation to this product or service, we want to be able to do it quickly and efficiently in the future. So, we have these kind of four big phases of a kind of a generalized innovation model that obviously are very complex and involve a lot of time, a lot of resources, but it at least gives us a kind of a good idea of what we have to do to be innovative in our company. So here you can see that same very, again, generalized, overly simplistic model of what we typically think of as the innovation process. And this is, again, in the text, but it provides a good visual for what we want to accomplish when we're trying to create an innovation strategy, when we're trying to create an innovative organization. Because innovation is one of those things that it is the kind of the buzzword in the private sector, out there in business right now. Every organization wants to be innovative. If you kind of read the mission and vision statements of some of your favorite organizations, public companies, if you read about their goals and their what they want, their objectives, what they want to accomplish maybe this year, this quarter, next year, chances are that organization is going to have the word, or that mission or vision statement is going to have the word innovation in it, because everybody knows they want to be innovative. All companies want to be innovative, and they all claim to be innovative. But only a handful of these companies actually accomplish it. And innovation is one of those things. It might be, maybe it's more of an art than it is more of a science, and because it's something that is so difficult to systematically kind of put your finger on and say, this is what we do first, this is what we do next, because it involves creativity, it involves having the right team, it involves having the right resources, it involves timing. All of these things have to come into alignment in order for organizations to truly capture innovation. And so you can kind of understand how challenging it is to develop an innovation strategy. I mean, we can put together a growth strategy pretty easily. We know the steps to growing a business. Well, we have to obviously invest in the right marketing efforts, the right sales strategy. We can put together a clear budget strategy. I mean, there are all kinds of elements of the strategic planning process that are systematic. Budgeting is systematic. The accounting process is systematic. Even marketing often is systematic. Now, marketing is a little bit different because it does involve some creativity, quite a bit of creativity, but we have kind of some standardized processes for our marketing efforts. Innovation is entirely different. Innovation is almost artistic in nature, and by its mere existence requires some significant amount of creativity and kind of artistic ability to be able to go out and create these new things and think up new ideas. It's kind of a combination of engineering, creativity, artistic ability, management ability, funding, resources. All these things come together in a way that, if done right, can create the next big thing. If not done correctly, then it just leads to wasted money and hopefully a learned experience. Some of the best organizations that we use as examples of creativity, obviously, or innovation, are obviously companies like Google. Apple has long been described as one of the most innovative companies, but even Apple here recently, after the death of Steve Jobs, even Apple has struggled here recently in maintaining the same level of innovation that they were able to capture for so long under the leadership of Steve Jobs. And so now they've had some struggles in terms of innovation. I mean, Samsung's a great competitor of Apple's, and they've been very innovative here lately. But again, Google's kind of one of the leaders that we think of as innovation. But Google invests so much money and time and resources to just new stuff. I mean, just new ideas. Their Project Glass, the Google Glasses. They've invested in energy. They've got some significant renewable energy projects underway, and so, but they put a lot of money into just trying to do what we think of as the impossible, and they just focus on trying to accomplish those things. So if we're to try to put together a systematic process for being an innovative organization, I mean, we're trying to develop a clear innovation strategy. Well, that's very difficult because of the nature of innovation. You know, innovation cannot be scripted, because by scripting innovation and having a systematic, step one, do this, step two, do this, it kind of stifles that emergent design or that accidental stumbling upon new ideas and concepts. And one of the best examples is Post-it notes. Post-it notes, a great example of kind of accidental innovation that eventually became one of the flagship products for 3M. I mean, one of their scientists obviously had what he thought was a setback when he was trying to come up with a new formula for super strong adhesive, and he was working on this kind of in his spare time, and he thought he had made a mistake, because in his efforts to come up with a super strong adhesive, he actually came up with a formula for a very weak adhesive, just a very sticky glue film that couldn't even be considered glue. It was just a kind of a tacky adhesive that couldn't even be considered glue, because nothing would stick together. It would just allow very light, like, pieces of paper to stick to stuff, and then you could peel it right off. And he thought he had failed and made a big mistake. Well, then he got the idea that, he had all these little scrap pieces of paper sitting on his desk with little notes on it. He thought he would just dab a little bit of that adhesive that he had messed up on the back of them, and kind of stick stuff to the wall and his phone and his refrigerator and whatever, and that became Post-it notes, and which is one of the all-time best-selling products for 3M. And so if we had had a scripted model for innovation, then chances are Post-it notes wouldn't have fit into that, because it was almost accidental. And so there's a balance between emergent design, which, when we talk about emergent design, that's new processes, new products and services that just happen to emerge out of either new ideas from failures or mistakes or inefficiencies. We fix things and we realize there's a better way of doing stuff. So there's a balance between emergent design and a very intentional innovation that is completed and executed on purpose. And so how do we balance those two things? Well, this is what this very simple model for innovation kind of gives us. If we're out there and we're trying to be innovative, we try to find opportunities for innovation. Well, what are those opportunities? Well, we have to be familiar with our market, with our product or service, our company to do so. So we first we search out. We try to search out opportunities. Once we've done that, we try to figure out what we're going to do and why. Try to implement, how are we going to make this thing happen? And then ultimately, how are we going to benefit from it? Then the creative process begins. The interesting thing about innovation is, in the past, we've thought of innovation as being something that simply applies to product-oriented companies or manufacturing-oriented companies. Companies that create or design, create, manufacture, and sell a product. An example being, again, I just used Apple. I mean, obviously Apple sells iPhones, iPads, iPods, those kinds of things, and MacBooks and other products. Dell. We often think of Intel. Intel's another one. They manufacture microchips, and they're constantly coming up with new innovations for better, faster, improved microchips and processors for computers. And so we've often thought of innovation as being a challenge for product-oriented organizations. However, we're now seeing that innovation is also something that is equally important to service organizations. Because in the past you thought, well, a company like Apple or a company like companies like the publishing business or the music businesses, those kind of things, that would create a product and sell that product. It's just a matter of time before that product is replaced by something better. Kind of like VCRs and DVD players, and now Blu-ray players, and pretty soon digital services, direct streaming and downloads and that kind of thing. So we thought of innovation as being something that replaced physical products. A new product would come out. But we're also seeing that the same is true for service organizations. And one of the best examples of this is the legal profession. In the recent years, the legal profession has been hit pretty hard by, and it's a service business. It's a fee-based. The legal profession is a fee-based service industry. Yet innovation has caused many firms operating in the legal industry has caused them to try to rethink their business model, because years ago, if you needed a will, or if you needed to incorporate your business, or if you needed to do some basic legal, have some basic legal services, you would call up your attorney, and he would charge you, a couple $100 an hour to do these very basic legal services. However, innovation has changed that. Obviously LegalZoom.com. Software has changed that. You could go buy a software package that'll do a lot of basic legal things for you. Basic contracts, basic wills and estate planning issues, business incorporation, trusts, even divorces. So that business model for a service organization has been changed by innovation as well. Same is true of another fee-based service, the accounting field. Again, years ago, most of the accounting work was personal, like public accounting work, and there are still obviously a significant number of CPAs, and there probably always will be. and there's a significant demand for those services as well. But the simple accounting services for folks that have just a simplified tax return that would go to service organizations like H&R Block or some of the other ones, that has changed because of software like TurboTax. And so a lot of folks now use TurboTax and do that themselves. So innovation has changed the way those service-based organizations function as well. And so some of the challenges for service organizations could be lack of an innovation culture. They don't think of themselves as being affected by innovation. So therefore they don't put together any type of innovation strategy. And even more so, one of the greatest challenges for fee-based organizations is this a conflict of interest between innovation and fee-based services. If your business as an attorney has always been business law and contracts and incorporations, those incorporating businesses, wills, trusts, those types of things, and all of a sudden you're expected to be innovative in helping put together kind of automated services or web-based services or software-based services for your clients to reduce their costs, that cuts into your business model. And you're hurting yourself by offering those services to your clients because it cuts down on your fees that you can charge. So we don't have a formal innovation process. We don't have any project management skills to allow us to implement, design, develop, and implement new products and services as well. So you'll see that these innovation challenges for service companies, service organizations, fee-based organizations, are very similar and almost parallel the same challenges for manufacturing organizations, which is ironic because it hasn't really been the case in the past. We've always thought of manufacturing or product-based organizations as being the ones affected most by innovation because their products become outdated and replaced with something else. We've never thought of service organizations being affected in the same way, but now they are. In another one that's kind of on the cutting edge, on the horizon, if you think of the industry against kind of standing up on the hill looking out to the strategic landscape of the medical field, telemedicine is quickly becoming something that a lot of hospitals, especially in rural areas, is quickly becoming kind of mainstream. If you think about hospitals that are located in small towns or kind of rural areas that might not have access to a large labor pool of doctors to choose from, yet those hospitals, their service is being able to treat patients there in their own beds. If you live in a small town and you've got a small local hospital, a small town of say 30, 40,000 people, and you've got a small local hospital, yet they have medical doctors, but they're general practitioners. They might not be specialists. They might not be cardiologists or neurologists. And so if a person has a massive heart attack or heart issues or maybe stroke patients, chances are that hospital will airlift or send those patients to another larger hospital in a major city or someplace else. Either send them by ambulance or helicopter or plane or whatever to another hospital to be treated there. Well, once they do that, once the hospital does that, they lose that patient, and obviously they're going to lose that money because their fees, their revenue model for a hospital is based on being able to keep that patient in their own beds and treat them there locally. Well, if you don't have the specialist, the doctor to do that, you have no choice but to send that patient someplace else. So telemedicine is a technology and innovation that is obviously changing that as well. That perhaps it'll allow organizations like hospitals to have the technology to teleconference a specialist in another town, like a neurologist or a cardiologist in another town, teleconference that person in both visually and audio and video into the same room with the general practitioners, so that those general practitioner doctors can treat that patient there locally under the guidance of a neurologist in a different town, allowing the hospital to keep that patient there locally. So these are the types of innovative ideas and challenges that service organizations have to think about. Not just product-based organizations, but those service-based organizations as well. And I wanted to include this table because it provides some very good examples of the difference between incremental and radical innovations in service-based organizations. Now, if you think back to last week, we know that incremental innovations is the same as saying sustaining innovations, and radical innovations are the same as saying disruptive. And kind of the best way to think of that is like, how do we do better or do different? How do we kind of improve a process, or how do we completely revolutionize a process? So, these are some very good examples of, if we think about the 4 dimensions of innovation, product innovation, process innovation, position innovation, and paradigm innovation, and the incremental versus radical examples of those. And going back to kind of the medical example, how do we modify or change our product or service? Well, the example of the telemedicine I gave you is a prime example of this. We can completely do different our service for stroke patients and cardiology patients by adopting an entirely different way of doing things, by conferencing in a specialist from an entirely different area of the world to oversee treatment here locally. So we kind of couple these two things together, product and service. In the telemedicine, we kind of couple this product and process together. There's kind of an overlap here between these two things, but it ultimately becomes this radical, doing things different type of mentality. So some very good examples in this table that can be applied to both service and even product organizations as well. Another interesting point from Chapter 2 is understanding how innovation models have changed and how they will continue to change throughout kind of the life of an organization, and as we kind of move forward with an understanding of what innovation is, and the more we focus on it, the more it's going to evolve and change, not only within our organization as we start focusing on innovation, but just the whole field of innovation in general. If we kind of look back to the kind of traditional model of innovation, it was kind of the first and second generation of what we thought innovation was driven by kind of that push and pull demand, kind of a standard linear model for new products and new services. It was simply driven by demand and demand only. As consumers wanted something different, somebody would design something unique and different and then sell it to them. And so it was kind of push-pull, the whole value chain and supply chain idea of innovation. Well, if there was strictly a product or service that somebody created that they had to sell, they'd push it out and heavily marketed so that people bought it whether they needed it or not, or it was the pull version, whereas we had consumers out there who had a need for it, and therefore somebody would design a product or service or come up with a new idea that would satisfy that need, and it would be pulled out through to the consumer. Now we're starting to see these, really understand that there's these other generations of innovation models as well. We move from the standard linear model, the push-pull idea of innovation, to coupling and feedback loops, enhancing the feedback from consumers back to manufacturers, and kind of this constant loop of understanding their needs and constantly changing ideas and modifying products and services at the small level continuously, so that we have continual sustaining innovation taking place. That kind of moves us forward to the fourth and fifth generations of innovation models, which are much more integrated into product design, new product development, integrated into the entire value chain, or even for some organizations, the whole system. If we think about many of the apps or the software updates or the system updates that you receive on your smartphones or your tablets, these are some great ideas of innovations. In fact, if you look at your apps that you use on your iPad or your tablet or your smartphone or whatever device that you use most frequently, you'll receive automatic updates. And then if you go read the reviews on those updates, or if you go read the reviews on apps before you buy them, you can kind of read what kind of feedback from customers, or even feedback from the app developer that says, this latest version, we fixed this bug, that bug, we updated this feature of the app, we included this feature, thanks for all your comments, everyone. Look forward to the next release or the next version. And so they're constantly, these app developers and these product and service organizations are very much in tune with the users of their product, because they offer feedback, these feedback loops, they offer integration into other areas of user connectedness. Maybe this app, if it's an app that integrates with your Facebook account or your Twitter account or your calendar or your email, it is really immersed into the entire user experience. And so you might have a whole systems integration model for innovation that's constantly what we refer to as the emergent design, which constantly result in new and emerging innovation, simply by being so integrated into the user experience. And so it's interesting to kind of think about how innovation models have changed so dramatically over the years, and then they continue to change, within an organization or just in the general field of innovation altogether. Now we start looking at ways to integrate our innovation process directly with the user at an individual level. And these last two tables that I wanted to include here in this PowerPoint is what I kind of thought of as being some of the most important things that we think about when we look at establishing routines for innovation. We know that our organization and our people have some, when we're trying to foster and encourage creativity and organization in our company, we have these basic abilities. We recognize needs, align those needs with strategy, acquire resources to execute. Obviously we have to generate new processes and ideas, choose which ones are best for our company, execute on that, implement, learn, and then obviously organizational development. So we have these basic abilities that take place continuously in our organization, and they have to take place in order for us to be innovative. But what makes this table so useful for us as executives is to be able to say, what are some routines that we should establish that's kind of a best practice for us as a manager and executive when we're trying to develop an innovative process in our company. And we kind of have these things listed here. In order to build upon a basic ability of acquiring resources for innovation, here are some routines that we can try to build into the culture of our company to foster innovation. Recognize the limitations of the company's own technology base and connect to external resources or sources of knowledge. And then we end up transferring technology and knowledge from different departments and different organizations or whatnot. Kind of a knowledge management approach here to innovation. And so this is very helpful when we're trying to build that innovation strategy. We can look at these abilities that we know we have to build upon, or we know that our organization already has, yet we might not have these basic routines that encourage innovation. And finally, taking it one step further here, understanding the fit between innovation and strategy. Obviously, we have, as you've seen from the reading, we have these kind of archetypes for the connection between innovation and strategy, and understanding how innovation fits into our overall strategy is one of the most important, if not the most important thing that we do as executives and managers when trying to build that innovation process. So how does innovation fit within our strategic decision-making process of the organization? Which is the correct archetype for us? What fits? What most correctly aligns with our organizational design? What is our level of risk acceptance, risk tolerance? Are we looking to build a strategy, an innovation strategy, and kind of a strategic plan that involves innovation and high levels of risk? Or, do we want to control risk? And so, because with each innovative project, with each new process that we try to foster and create for new ideas, new products, new services within our organization, there's going to be some element of risk with that. We're going to risk resources because we have to invest in that new idea or new concept. There's going to be a risk of our business model. What if we come up with a product or service that completely threatens to change the way that our business is run, or that our business receives revenue? What if we know that we have to shift strategies completely and move to, in the newspaper industry, move to digital space? Well, if we do that, that completely eliminates the need for people to buy our print newspaper or have it delivered to their house every day. If they can just read it on their computer at work, or if they can read it on their phone. So what level of risk are we willing to accept? And so those are kind of the big picture things that we associate with innovation and strategy. And I've kind of included the tables that I thought were most relevant from this week, but that pretty much wraps up chapter 2. And again, kind of an overview of innovation in general. And as we continue to move forward, we'll be covering a lot more content, because I think we're going to be covering, looks like a couple of chapters every week from this point forward. And so we'll have a lot more content, and so it's going to go by very quickly. So having this broad picture of, where innovation fits into a executive level kind of critical thinking, way of critical thinking is helpful, because everything else from this point forward is going to focus on actually how to do this. How do we make this happen within our organization? Now that we understand where it all fits together, we understand what innovation is, we understand why it's important, and have kind of a basic model for innovation with our organization. Now let's go focus on the specifics of it.